Hello world, it's Dave again, and I got another book review here for you now. It's going to be Catch-22 by Joseph Heller? Joseph Keller? Catch-22. Who is it again? Who wrote that? Joseph Heller. Okay, so this is kind of one of these cool instances where I was recommended to read this book, and I didn't know a lot behind it aside from the fact that people said that it was a war story. And war stories I find interesting. You know, I've read enough historical fiction that sort of thing appeals to me. But what I was not ready for was the main strength of this book, and really surprised me. And definitely, I would say, I don't even know if I've read a book like this before. And that is to say that it is a dark comedy. It is a dark comedy book. And that's what kind of, you know, set me back on my feet, where I was like, what? I was really surprised. And so we've all heard of the idea of Catch-22. It's sort of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. And the idea in this book, I wonder if this book actually coined the phrase, if that's where it became popularized from, I'm not sure. But you've got your main character, and he wants to leave the military. It's these guys who are on bombing runs, and and he's done enough of them that he's starting to fear for his life. He's seen enough people killed in action that he would like to get out of it. And so he goes to them and says, you know, I'd like to be relieved of my duty because I've flown enough flights, and you should let me go at this point. And they said, well, no, that, you know, we can only dismiss you if you're actually insane. You have to keep flying otherwise. And he says, well, I'm insane. And they said, well, no sane person would want to stop, or no insane person would want to stop flying these missions. And so he thinks to himself, and he's like, so that means if I fly the missions, I have to keep going, but if I go to you, it means that I'm sane enough that I should have to keep flying the missions. And so it's just lose-lose. And the way that this story is told, beyond that character, and kind of like me setting up that idea, that Catch-22, is it's told through, there is that main character as your reference point. He's kind of like where everything starts off. But the way that the story is told is through individual characters, and you get it from their perspective as the book goes along, and you meet all these different characters. You know, there's like a dozen of them or something like that. And each person's story, I swear to you, is funnier than the last, and in a really dark, twisted way. I think this book does a great job of showing you, you know, some of the characters are over the top, but I think that it's historically accurate enough in the sort of things that they're doing that, as much as the characters might be over the top, it is doing a good job of showing you some of the absurdity of war, and sort of the way that people are behaving in a lot of cases has nothing to do with any greater good or accomplishing, you know, like whatever goal might stop the war. So much of war is just the acting out of personal interests, which isn't terribly surprising. We've probably heard that, but he does a fantastic job of conveying that through this incredibly hilarious storyline, with a sort of humor that you have to be paying attention for. If you just read this through and weren't thinking like more deeply maybe about what he was saying, you might not get it. But if you do, it's really funny. And I think a lot of the humor, when I say it's dark, it's rooted in absurdity, that when they have to do these things, or they don't have to do things, you just can't believe that they do or don't have to do them. And it's great for that reason. And it's really cool, too, to give you sort of, I like historical fiction a lot, and it gives you a glimpse into some really interesting historical fiction regarding, I believe it's the Second World War. In fact, I'm almost certain it's the Second World War. I'm reviewing this a little later than after when I initially read it, which is not usually what I would do, but it's such a good book. If anybody checks out my channel, I wanted them to know that this is a crazy stamp of approval, wicked book to read, and especially if you want something a little different, because maybe somebody can correct me on this, but I don't know a ton of dark comedy books. You know, I know I know books that have humor in them. I know books that have humor within different subgenres, but not so much where the whole point of the book is to be humorous and dark. The kind of a different example to this would be Terry Pratchett. I've talked about him on my channel as just an author that I enjoy reading, where he's just straight up comedy, and it's some of the best comedy I've ever read. So if you want to read comedy, go to Terry Pratchett and read the Discworld series. He's got like 40 books. But if you want something with a little bit more of an edge, that's absolutely what you get from this author, and it's really, really cool. Yeah, so that's about the end of it. I mean, the plot isn't terribly complex. It's more funny just for the stories that you get for all these individual people. You could say it's basically about this guy trying to get out of the war, but there's so much else going on around it. That seems almost less the point, more that you just see how these people are living. So a strong recommend. Incredible book, really, really funny, and a really interesting genre without actually realizing that's what it was before I started reading it. So I highly recommend Catch-22 if you want something a little different with an edge and that makes you laugh. All right, so that's just a quick little review for this book. Thanks for dropping by the site. If you like my stuff, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. More book reviews to come. I'm reading a really interesting book right now called The Hydrogen Sonata, which is, I've always talked about how I like very clear prose, and this guy doesn't attempt to do that whatsoever. It's very complex. I don't want to say convoluted because I know that it's very purposely written in this way, but it's going to be an interesting review when I finish because he's got some fantastic ideas going on inside of it. All right, so yeah, like, subscribe, share. Like I like to say, thanks for tripping with Dave. Until we meet again next time, world. Ciao for now. Peace.